everyone, thank you for coming once again. My name is Stevy Acevedo, the curator here at the Guild Museum of Arcadia Heritage. So welcome. Today we're going to be having our first history talk of the year, which is Arcadia's participation in the Rose Parade. We have some fellow people here today as well who have participated in what we're going to be talking about today, the different associations. So we might invite them to come up and talk afterward. But let's get started. So here in Arcadia, the first rose float that ever happened was in 1914, and that was done by Anita Baldwin, who submitted this entry on behalf of the Baldwin Ranch. You can see it's a peacock made of white roses and lilies of the valley, and it definitely did win some awards, which is really great. And then the first float that ever was submitted by the city of Arcadia was actually in 1915, and it was the Dove of Peace. And it was from the ladies of the Cooperative Arcadians, now known as Arcadia Women's Club, who were responsible for this city's first entry. And of course, they did get support from Anita Baldwin for that. Here are some floats I will be showing throughout our presentation. Some of the floats that the city of Arcadia has created over the years until the last one that was done in 2003. So you can see that Anita Baldwin was definitely a part of some of them, including the one in 1918, which was Anita Baldwin and the Red Star Society. We have the Queen of the Foothills, the Oaken Bucket, Ireland Stagecoach, and the King of Sports in 1936. Then we still have some more that are here present. Evangeline in 1937, Hobby Horse 1938, For Settlers 1939, On the Air 1940, Spirit of 76 in 1941, and Hot Dog and Bun 1950. They start getting a little clever with their floats. Definitely very colorful as well. Here we have other ones, including the Sleepy Lagoon, America the Beautiful, June Bride, Cradle of Freedom, Headlines of Loveliness, and Winter Circle. So you might see that some of these photographs are definitely in black and white or in color because over time they start choosing to do some pictures in color. So one amazing thing that we definitely need to bring up is the Arcadia Tournament of Roses Association. This association was formed in 1964, and we're definitely responsible for the floats that were created for the city of Arcadia. Many of the events that were done to help fund the floats, such as the San Diego Workout Breakfast, which we see a picture of from one of the scrapbooks we have in our collection. And then they also had an auto show preview party and many more different events that we're going to be talking about today as well. One of those popular events was the Wine Shed Mixer, which was originally subtitled as A Taste of Arcadia, but then that name seemed to be more popular to keep on. So the event would take place in the Arcadia Chamber of Commerce, iconic brown building, and then at one point it did move to the Arcadia Arboretum. And so once unfortunately the association did close in 1999, it dissolved. A Taste of Arcadia still seems to be a popular event that is done at the Arboretum. So the Arcadia Tournament of Rose Association was also responsible for having a royal court, which would ride on the float. So we have some of the photographs of the floats, and you should notice some of the royal court people on them, which is really nice. This is one of the group of girls that was part of the royal court for one of the years that we're going to be talking about. So here are some other floats that we have as part of our kind of lineup of which ones the city of Arcadia has been a part of. Camino Real in 1967, I Love a Parade, A Day at the Fair, Arcadia Salutes Australia's Waratahs Festival, Adventures in Paradise, and Stairway to the Stars. So as part of our collection here at the museum, which is pretty amazing, the different things that we have Mr. Kermit Hartzler. He was the president of the Arcadia Tournament of Rose Association from 1969 and 1970. We do have his scrapbook as part of our collection. His daughter donated it to us here at the museum. So after the event, you're more than welcome to come and take a look at it. And it's in really good condition compared to other scrapbooks we have in our collection. And so I highly recommend you check it out. It shows like the different events that it had going on to kind of fundraise again for the floats and so on and so forth. So definitely encourage you guys to do it. The float that he was a part of is
this one that we're showcasing here. And here you can also see the different royal court and the queen sitting on the float as well. Here are some other floats that we have. Flash Gordon, 1973, A Garden of Roses, 1974, The First Americans, Proud as a Peacock, 200 Years, On a Sunday Afternoon, and Follow Your Dreams. So one really cool thing about Flash Gordon in 1973, we actually have the diorama that was created prior to making the huge float. And so you are definitely encouraged to come take a look at it. But we also have photographs of the Tournament of Roses Association holding it, trying to get an idea of how it would look and how they could basically create this float for Flash Gordon. And if you don't remember how Flash Gordon's float looked like, here it is. So you can imagine from this little guy ending up being several feet up in the sky was pretty cool. We also have in our collection Mr. Charles Guild, president of Arcadia Tournament of Roses Association from 1976 to 1977. If you all know, the Guild Museum is named after Ruth and Charles Guild, so they were definitely a big part of the community here in Arcadia. So here's a little snippet from his scrapbook of the work that he was doing while he was president at the Arcadia Tournament of Roses Association. The float that he was associated to while he was president was On a Sunday Afternoon, which you see here in 1977. Again, you can notice all those royal court ladies on it, so it's pretty nice. Here's some other floats. A Great Day at the Races, White Christmas, Spring in the Air, Arcadia, Newcastle Sister Cities, the Senior Prom, and A Salute to Volunteer. As we mentioned, Ruth was also a big person in the community and is the person responsible as well for the Guild Museum. So here we have her scrapbook, which her daughters donated to us here at the museum, of when she was elected the Arcadia Tournament of Roses Association. And she was the first woman president that was leading this, taking on this role in 1983, 1984. So we also have this graphic, as I mentioned, and here is kind of like the celebration of her being designated to that position. And the float that she was associated to was A Salute to the Volunteer, 1984. So you can see those girls with their big skirts. More floats that we have here are Courier and Ives Holiday, Sunday in the Park, Magical Moments, Beam Me Up Scotty, Happy New Year, and Showboat. Your Dreams Come True, Your Own Backyard, A Day at the Races, Route 66, The Sport of Kings, and Winter Wonderland. Then, as I mentioned previously, in the 1990s is when it kind of it started getting really expensive to make floats. Hence the reason why the Arcadia Tournament of Roses Association dissolved in 1999. But they definitely still made an impact in the floats that were associated to the Rose Parade. As part of our collection, one thing that we also have is the Pasadena Rose Parade pins. So you can see that we have two of them here posted from 2003 and 1987. And typically the pins are associated to the different floats that are shown that year. So we have even individual ones that we have in our collection from that. So the last float that Arcadia has done was actually in 2003. It was known as 100 Years of Good Health, Happiness, and Prosperity. This float was dedicated to the city centennial celebration in 2003. So on the float, you could see that they won the Queen's Trophy for that year. They also had a lot of iconic locations or different things that are associated to Arcadia. So there was nurses from the ICU unit from the Methodist Hospital. There was children on the boat. You can see on the side as well with them. We definitely celebrate our veterans here in the city. We have jockeys because of the racetrack. You can see the iconic Queen Anne's Cottage in the background as well. And on there, we also have peacocks because we're known for peacocks. We can't go without talking about the Arcadia High School Band and Color Guard as well. because they are definitely a big part of the parade that goes on as well. Founded in 1952, the Arcadia High School Apache Marching Band and Color Guard is one of the largest and most decorated bands in the state of California. The marching band has been selected to perform in several Pasadena Rose Parades, most recently in 2021. So here we have a picture of them marching in 1981. In our collection here at the museum, we have several different items. We have souvenir programs, pins, stickers, photographs, dioramas, posters, artwork, and much more. I did bring out some of them for you all to see, including the cape that the queen would wear. We have one of the crowns, of course, the diorama. We have also a diorama that was created for the 2003 Rose Float, which was the last one that was created, and then we also have some scrapbooks. So I highly encourage you after the talk to come and take a look at some of these items here. But today we are definitely very excited to have Leah Cullen, who was actually the queen of the Rose Parade in 1953, come and talk to us a little about her experience. And yeah, feel free to come on up. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the Shimmins for inviting me here today and all of you to be here. And I'm fortunate to have even my husband, John Cullen, in the back row there, who's coming to visit today as well. You know, this is really a strange turn of events when I think of Arcadia, because I'll begin from the beginning. First of all, I was Rose Queen in 1953. I was 17 years old. And at that time, both of my grandmothers lived in Arcadia. All right, now we move forward, and then I was asked to be a judge in the judging of the Queen and Court for the Arcadia Float. And I did that for 3 years. And then now we come along a few years later, and now here I am living in Arcadia now for about 12 or 15 years. And it just seems like Arcadia was meant for me and meant for to be here. And I'm so proud that I live in this city, and I'm proud of all the work that Arcadia does. And another interesting note is that our neighbor, the Schumanns, I was asked to be at the Queen's event that they were going to have for the Boy Scouts of America. And who of all people should be there but Lee Schumann when I was doing there as speaker? So it seems like my whole life has been centered around Arcadia. But as Rose Queen, it was really a marvelous experience that I have carried with me my whole life. And it started, if you can all imagine, in a gym class. Because in those days, rather than going to a very elaborate place, we all tried out in our gym clothes. And the reason for it was they wanted every girl to have the experience of being able to try out and have this experience, and we just all looked the same, and we went from there. Well, my number happened to be 77. So I never dreamed I'd ever be on a rose court. I mean, I thought that happened to other girls. But all of a sudden, my friends kept saying, Leah, your number's up there. I thought it's impossible. Well, the 77's easy to remember. It's up there. Well, this continued on for every single one of the, it went to 100, and then it went to 25. And at one time, in the beginning, there was 2,000 at the Rose Bowl. They actually did it at the Rose Bowl because we were not only John Muir, but we were PCC, girls participating. So now here we are at the 25. And I'm thinking, oh, this is such an experience, but you know, that'll probably be the end. Well, one of the judges was sitting at a table similar to this, and I went by and we were doing all this speaking, and they were asking us all sorts of questions, and he just kind of flipped his pencil and kind of, well, I guess I don't like her, was my opinion that I thought was happening. Well, much to my dismay, a few weeks later, I got the courage to say to him, why did you just flip your pen when, you know, I went by? He said, oh, that was nothing. He said, I just knew you were going to be queen. So it taught me a very good lesson. Don't always judge what's happening in front of you. And then as we moved along, I was very fortunate to have the experience of that wonderful experience of New Year's Day, looking down that parade route and seeing all of these people and the smiles and the cheers that all went with it. It's something I'll never forget. Oh, and on another note, our coronation, rather than being very small and intimate like they are now, was actually in the Civic Auditorium in Pasadena, and to a crowd that, I mean, you couldn't find a seat if you didn't get your reservation in time. And then that was a full-on show with stars and dancers and all that went with it. And then at the end, we would go to the side ballroom and there would be a dance. So it was all very elaborate and wonderful. Then January came with the beautiful game, and well, of course, USC won against Wisconsin, which was very exciting, 7-0. And I thought to myself, well, I guess that's it, it's over. Well, no, it wasn't over. Then all of these invitations started to happen. You know, we'd like you to be a speaker. We'd like you to come to our city, all these things. One of the first ones was to San Antonio, Texas, to be Grand Marshal of the parade. Well, that was quite an honor, and had a wonderful time there. Then the next thing I knew, they said, we'd like you to come to New York and be a representative for the Tournament of Roses and present the All-American Rose winner. Well, that was an exciting thing, so they paid for both my parents and myself to go. And we went to the United Nations, we went to all these wonderful, wonderful places there and presented these roses. And the man who was PR said, you know, is there anything you'd particularly like to do? I said, well, I'm studying economics. I really would like to stand on the floor of the stock exchange. Oh, no problem, he says. So this is something, of course, that would not ever happen today because that would not be allowed. Then from there, my Grand Marshal that year was Richard Nixon, and he invited me to the White House. Now, for this little 17-year-old who was studying all of these economics and all that went with it, what an absolute joy that was to be able to tour the White House at such a young age and have that experience. So all in all, when you look at this whole picture of my life, I'm so grateful to the tournament because they opened a door that few ladies have a chance to ever experience, and the people and the associations that I have come in contact with, just like you all here today, that I'll never forget and I'll never quit appreciating what they did for me. But also, I'd like to say, I'm sure that you all have a lot of questions or things you'd like to know, so I'd like to open it up. Does anybody have something they'd like to ask? Yes.
I understand that you stay in touch, all the princesses and queens stay in touch with each other and have social gatherings.
Yes, we do, and each year we have a very large event that we hold to welcome the new queen into our group, and we call it a sisterhood because we feel like we're sisters. And you know, it's nice because we tell each other if you need somebody to talk to or you're having problems, then you know we're an opening ear and we'll be more than happy to help out. So yeah, that's something we look forward to. And then the tournament puts on a beautiful, beautiful luncheon in our honor every year around November, and it's held at the tournament house. It's really lovely. So they haven't forgotten, that we spent a lot. Anybody else have a question? Anything about the judging or anything like that?
Who judges? Who's the judge? Who are the
Well,
judges?
we had 10 gentlemen. It's usually 10 that have, that are chosen. And for me, I lived in La Cañada, and one of the princesses lived in Sierra Madre. Well, they said at school, well, if you don't hear from them by 6 o'clock, and this is when they were picking the princesses, you might as well forget it because you obviously didn't make the board. Well, guess what? I went to bed. The door knocked. Doorbell's ringing. My mother's up making gifts for Christmas. She looks out the window. Here are 10 men standing on her doorstep. And she said, oh, well, come in, Well, here I get up. I come back out through a lot of all things. And here are the 10 men standing in our living room and saying, you have become a princess. Now, my brother was quite the comedian, and he didn't want to, embarrass me, so he completely dressed and shaved and came out and said, oh, I'm the brother. So it was an exciting moment. And then as queen, we were chosen at the athletic club. But sadly enough, we couldn't tell anyone for 2 weeks because they didn't want the press to know it, that far in advance. So we had to keep totally quiet. But I remember we were all standing there and they said, now we're going to present who the queen is. And I looked to my right because I thought this was the girl who was going to be the queen. Well, it wasn't. So it was a huge surprise, and I will be forever grateful. But it's so nice that you all have this organization to honor the tournament and the the floats that Arcadia has presented. And I also brought a little folder here, I think I went, that has some pictures that you might get a kick out of looking at, because a lot of the television programs we were on involved a lot of stars.
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
When you said you judged for Arcadia's Royal Court,
Yes, and I,
was that through the JCs?
pardon me,
Was that through the JCs at the Masonic Hall?
you know, I just remember that Charlie Gill and his wife are very much involved. I remember meeting him, and they took us to the racetrack, and we had all these wonderful dinners and parties and all of this thing. And it was interesting for me because it was different to be on the other side of the table and what, you know, the judges made me go through rather than being the one being judged. So it was like an interesting experience, but I made so many nice friends through that group. Again, all of you wonderful Arcadia people. It was great. Yes?
What year, excuse me, what year were you judged for Arcadia, do you know?
You know, it was, I think when Charlie Gill and his wife were president. And it was like 3 years, and we had 3 people from the Term of Roses as judges, and then the rest of the judges were from Arcadia. They asked us to participate, and interestingly enough, one of the other judges is a young man, Gary Hayward, that I grew up with since I was in kindergarten. And he also lives in Arcadia.
Our daughter was Miss Arcadia in 1984, and I think you were one of the judges.
That could be, yeah. And I used to hear from several of the girls through the years because we kind of became friends, and it was really fun. Yeah. Yes, John?
Leah, I have a question. You mentioned television. Can you tell us how many times you were on television? Or what programs you were on?
Well, there's tons, but let's see, Bob Hope, and the one that I remember so vividly was in New York City, and they asked me if I would be on television and talk about roses. I said, well, sure. I got to the set, and here was a great big long table with a place that had a rose bush, a hole, fertilizer, and all things. And he said, now we want you to show how to plant a rose, because obviously you know. What am I going to do? Well, thank God my father was a bit of a horticulturist, and so I thought, okay, I'm just going to try to remember what he did when he planted roses. And I winged my way through saying, well, you do this, and then you do that, and you do this. And because once you're on television, you know, in those days they didn't, you know, it was all live. You didn't have any way of escaping. And so that was fun. And there was just so many television appearances. I know people think that we didn't have very many, but it was nonstop. And I remember thinking to myself at the time, you know, how am I ever going to get all my grades taken care of with all of these events and being gone all the time? So I went to all my teachers and professors, because John Muir at that time, you know, was the high school and junior college vote. And they said, oh, don't worry, we'll give you extra credit, we'll do whatever you need. I said, perfect. So then by January 1, I'm thinking, okay, now what am I going to do? You know, I've got all these appearances and being out at this date. How am I going to manage this? And then I got to thinking, you know, you can go to school anytime, but you can't have this experience and not accept everything they ask you to do. And I'm so glad I did that, because it was easy then to pick up the school after that. Anybody else?
Do you get to keep any of the outfits?
I have every single one. And the gown was done by William Cahill, who was a famous designer for wedding dresses. And recently, the Pasadena Museum, like you have here, I did a whole show for, I think it was a month, on the clothes that we wore, and you know, our suits. And the gentleman, we were at Bullock's Pasadena, it was then, and the gentleman who was in charge, every time we turn around, at a meeting, he'd say, you know, you girls need this. You know, you need coats. You know, you need umbrellas. It was like he was Santa Claus all the time, giving us goodies. And so, yeah, we got, they gave us everything from our shoes straight up, you know, a whole number. That was exciting. Anybody else?
How was your family?
Pardon me?
How did they include the family of the girls? Were they invited to all the activities?
Yes, yes. Unfortunately, in those days, though, they didn't involve the fathers as much as they do today, which I'm pleased about. Because you see, I don't recall what year it happened, but it went from the high school, junior college to open it up to all of San Gabriel Valley, which I was thrilled about. That's what it should be, because we're a huge community. But I don't know, I just think it all worked out just the way it was supposed to.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you a question. Was there an ice rink in Pasadena at that time?
Yes, yes, and I used to go there a lot, because I didn't do a lot of contact sports. I was more interested in, there was a golf offered in our school, and I took up golf with a huge class. It was great fun, and then I took ice skating.
So I remember it well.
It was on, I think it's a storage unit now.
Oh, yeah, the building is still there.
Yeah.
It is a storage
Royal.
place.
It's on Royal.
Yeah, it's still there. It was really, Pasadena and Arcadia were wonderful cities, and I don't think people realize, I took a job in Hawaii for 3 years, and I was working for the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. And people would get off of the elevator, and they would say, "Oh, Leah, what are you doing here?" And I thought, how could they possibly remember? But people are very, very cognizant of the Queen and Court and the Tournament of Roses more than we realize. Well, we take a little bit for granted because we live here, but believe it or not, it's still a big thing to a lot of people. And just the fact that I would be a neighbor with the Shimmins, and we were at the same,
It's remarkable.
It is, and we've had more fun exchanging pictures and reminiscing a little bit about those days. And it was really cute because all of the boys in the Boy Scout, they would send me little gifts and, oh, someday I hope we get to meet you, and I hope I'm going to propose because I'll be older. And all these cute things, they'd send me all kinds of presents and pictures, and it was really nice. So anyway, I just thank you all so very much for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to talk about my experience in the tournament and also my love for Arcadia. I'm really very thankful that I live here and am part of this city.
Thank you. And then also, without even knowing, we have even a couple more speakers, but Lee Shimmin, I'm going to invite you up to talk about your experience being part of the Rose Parade.
Thank you. Thank you, Stevie. Okay. Well, Leah did such a good job, I don't think I can outdo her. But I brought some pictures too, and you can watch and see those over there. But it's been a pleasure living here and being a part of the community and being the president of the Chamber of Commerce in 2000. That was an exciting year because we had, remember that Y2K. I can never forget it. My wife works for the Bank of America, and I went there in the morning to see the parade because I always wanted to see the parade, and there were sheriffs everywhere, and they thought they would be a big problem, but it didn't work out that way. But Pasadena is a marvelous town. I also worked at J.C. Penney's. That's how I got here in 1976, and I'll tell you, this town is a creative town. And if you don't know, we have many companies that started in Arcadia. And I just want to get someday a list of all the companies that we still have that are still in Arcadia. And J.C. Penney's is still here. So thank God.
Thank you. And then I'm going to put her on the spot. Marilyn Daleo, do you want to come talk a little bit about your experience being here?
Good morning. I am Marilyn Daleo, and I had no idea I was going to be talking today, but this is exciting. And Lee, thank you for sharing your Pasadena Tournament of Roses Queen experience. That's a wonderful review of what it meant to you. But at Arcadia level of Arcadia Tournament of Roses, I made some notes. I first became involved in the Arcadia Tournament of Roses Association after an invitation by Charles Gill to go on the board. Our meetings were held over at the Chamber of Commerce building. Santa Anita Racetrack was big in supporting everything that we did as a Tournament of Roses. For me, my first job on the Arcadia Tournament of Roses board was to be the press chairman. So I remember early on, I got to meet the Royal Court and interview them, and we ran a feature in the Arcadia Tribune. Each princess was featured, and you got to know something about them. Backing up a little bit, the court was selected by the JCs. The JCs would hold a pageant over at Masonic Temple, and I have limited memory of that, although my husband was involved as a JC member. But they would hold a pageant in the evening, and at the end of the evening they would turn over 5 young ladies to us. And I'm thinking, Lee, you must have been involved in that too. There was a contingency of judges that made that choice. So then the princesses were turned over to the Arcadia Tournament of Roses, and again, as press chairman, I would interview them and let the community get to know them in the newspaper. So I think I was press chairman for 2 or 3 years. And then I got a promotion, so to speak, to be the chaperone to the Royal Court. And what was involved with that was the JCs would turn the court over to us, and then we would meet with the girls and their mothers and tell them what was coming. And what was coming was an opportunity to go to a local salon and have their hair cut and fluffed and taken care of, maybe some makeup tips. And then I remember my job as chaperone was to take them to Henshaw's, where in the early years, they got their gowns from Henshaw's. And I'm thinking in the later years, we worked with Buffum's over at the mall. But, so the girls would get their hair taken care of. We'd go to Henshaw's for gowns, or to Buffum's for gowns and blazers. They were provided outfits that they wore to the events where they represented the Arcadia Tournament of Roses. I don't know if some of you remember Cora Montgomery Roberts, who was the poise cymbale lady at Henshaw's. And I remember she would take the girls and she would advise them how to sit and cross their legs and hold their hands in their lap. And one thing I remember is she said, when someone looks at you, they should not be saying, "She's the princess." They should look at you and say, "Oh, she's the princess." And so that was the goal of that. So once the girls were outfitted, as chaperone, my job was to escort them to the events where they represented the city of Arcadia, and those included the workouts breakfast. We would do things, we'd have lunch with celebrities over in the racetrack in the really fancy room. I forget what it's called.
Turf Club.
The Turf Club. And I'm thinking that was where the rest of the judging took place. That by having a meal with the girls and just socializing with them, the final selection was made who was going to be the queen. And then, of course, the big deal was a coronation ball that was generally held at Santa Anita Racetrack, and that was a big, elegant thing. So so before, of course, before the parade, we knew who the queen was. So on New Year's Eve, the girls got to do their own thing up until midnight, and then we would meet at the Chamber of Commerce and around 12:30, 1 o'clock. And the police department, Arcadia Police Department, would escort us over to Orange Grove Avenue, where Phil and Joanne Scott had provided their beautiful RV converted bus that was a beautiful RV, and the girls could spend their time in there getting ready for the parade. At 3 a.m. there was judging. So the girls would have to get out of the motorhome, go sit on the float, and look the way they were going to look going down the parade route, and the judges would come by and select the awards for the big parade announcement. And so then the girls would go back to the motorhome and maybe try and get a little sleep, and then be back on the float to actually go down the parade route at sometimes 7 a.m. or something like that. And then my job was finished at, once they were on the float, and they'd go down the parade route, and then again Arcadia PD would meet them there with units and take them back and work their way through the crowds and get them back to Arcadia. Let's see here. I think that's pretty much what I remember. Are you going to call on, Chris and Carol McGuire are here, and they were big in the Tournament of Roses as well, and their daughter was the Miss Arcadia Queen. And so would you like to come up and say a few words? It was a great experience. I'm trying to remember my queens. I know I had Marlene Greathouse, if that's a name anyone remembers, Lori Churchman, and I had another court, and I'm drawing a blank. Gina Arobio, Ginger Maroney. I'm drawing a blank on the rest of them, but anyway.
Going pretty good.
Well, anyway, here's Chris and Carol McGuire.
Thank you. Well, my history, Carol, I got involved in the Tournament of Roses in the late 70s. I owned a business called Arcadia Glass and Mirror on Santa Anita. Many of you remember that. It's across the street from Arcadia Lumber. I was also president of the Arcadia Tournament of Roses. And then I was also president of the Arcadia Chamber of Commerce. But the interesting story that I'd like to tell was what happened with the funding of the Tournament of Roses. It used to be that the chamber would go to the city of Arcadia, and they would ask them for funding to help build the float. Well, they were very generous in those days, and so there wasn't a lot of money that needed to be raised. When I first got involved, I think the total budget, we paid a builder named Rick Chapman. If any of you know, if you've been around, you've heard about Rick Chapman. And it was like $50,000. Well, in those days, if you're getting 30, 35 from the city, you don't have to raise a lot of money. Well, that began to go away, and and also at the same time, the funding went down and the prices went up. I mean, they're huge today. So that's why we ended up we became more of we supported the Tournament of Roses float, but we had to do it with a lot of fundraisers, and we had a lot of them throughout. And she was talking about the coronation ball. the year our daughter, Kelly, was Miss Arcadia, we had the coronation ball, and there was a lady named Celia Calm, I don't know.
Yes.
Remember Celia? And we had it in the lobby of the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion downtown. We had the whole thing to ourselves. But in those days, and here's a funny story, in those days, we would draw 500 people to the coronation ball. And the problem we had was, there was not a hotel in Arcadia, and the embassy suite was being built when I was involved with the chamber, and they said they would build a big ballroom. Well, they did it, but a single story. And so we had to go to places like the Huntington Hotel or somewhere, or at the racetrack, because to get 500 people and feed them and have a coronation ball was impossible. So that was the story of how we then became a fundraising group. And when I was president, this little thing here was a bunch of people. Marilyn was involved, but there was a guy named Larry Pape, Dr. Larry Pape. His wife was on the school board, Carol, and he and I were sitting around talking, and I said, you know, if we can get every person in Arcadia to just give us $1, we got it made. So we printed up this thing that says, I own a piece of the float. And
I think we still have a lot of these in our garage.
Yeah, we got a bunch of
Yes, bring them in.
and believe it or not, we ended up, and at the time I owned Arcadia Glass, and I don't know if you've ever been to a glass shop, but we had a big, huge table for cutting glass. So we cleaned that off, and we cordoned it off in little sections, and we made a person in charge of neighborhoods, and we had all these people in my glass shop. And then they brought their kids, their grandkids, anybody from the, and they would go out, and we got some plastic jugs, not the 5-gallon, the 1-gallon jugs. I still have one. And we had kids, a couple of weekends, we would meet in the morning on a Saturday and go out and try to collect $1 and just go door to door. And it actually works. But the problem was that the price of the floats when I left, they were in the 200, 300, and some of the people, China Air, and they were paying 300,000. Now that's back in the 80s, which today would be, I have no idea what a float costs. But anyway, that's how that little badge that says, I think I own a piece of the float started. Carol, you want to?
Well, he didn't say anything about the year before he was president. He was float sharing, and we had a great discussion about what the theme would be and yada yada. Well, he loves Christmas, as I do, and he thought we should do a float which was White Christmas. Everybody poo-pooed it. You can't do that, including Rick Chapman. We had a lot of discussions in our family room. And, sorry, I have this problem. I haven't had a cup of coffee or a cup of tea yet, so it'll go away later. Come back, I'll talk to you later. Anyway, a lot of dissent about choosing the White Christmas. Finally, they gave in, we chose White Christmas, and that year it won the theme prize. So it was a good decision, and it was a beautiful float.
It was.
And Chris was very determined that it would be that theme, and it turned out great. And when our daughter was, both Chris and Kelly, our daughter, have been involved with the float building aspect of the parade. He and Rick Chapman became friends long before he was president of the tournament. And Chris would volunteer to go and pick up flowers. I don't know how they do it now. Okay, I need so many dozen more of these flowers. Go down wherever he would go. He'd leave in the morning and I wouldn't see him. He was off picking up flowers. And Kelly was always interested, so she tagged along with her daddy. and they would pick up flowers, and she started building floats. We're working on gluing flowers when she was probably in junior high school. Did that all the way through college when she was in town. And actually after she started working, she would go out and build floats. The last week she'd take vacation and she'd be there. But funny story, when, and my mother always spent Christmas and New Year's with us. And Kelly came home from working on floats one day. She had very long, thick hair. A bucket of the white glue that they built to do the flowers with. Somebody was up on a scaffolding. She was underneath. They spilled the bucket. And she had this white glue in her hair. I took a look at it and said, I can't help you. There's no way. And her grandmother, who was a very patient lady, sat there and with hot water and a comb, got it all out of her hair. And so she didn't have to get her hair all chopped off. But she had this beautiful, long, thick hair. This was when she was in high school, before she was the Arcadia Rose Queen. So we've had a very close association with the Tournament of Roses through Arcadia. We were very sad when they closed it down, because I think it was a great thing for the community. The coronation was a big social event. Everybody who could attended, from all parts of Arcadia. And it was just, I think, a unifying thing for the community, and it was very sad. And it was money, that closed it down. So, anyway, that's our story.
And I think Kelly was pregnant with our first granddaughter
When she finally gave it up.
when she was working on the float. She actually worked her way up to be a float supervisor and was actually paid to run a crew for Rick Chapman's company. When she was working, when she'd take her vacation and do this just for
Yeah,
fun.
the last float that the one she was chairman of was, it had Frankenstein on it. It was one of these huge ones. Rick Chapman was the first fellow who did these gigantic floats, and had some discussions with the Tournament of Roses about how big they were and whether they would allow him to do one that big. But Kelly was in charge. Her biggest one that she did was that, and she intended to be here today, but she's an alumni of Texas Christian University, which is referred to as TCU. And if any of you are followers of college football, you know that they're in the big game. TCU, they were not supposed to be, but they're playing for the national championship on Monday night. And she's a big football fan, big TCU fan, and one of her sorority sisters is coming out to go to the game, who is arriving at LAX at 11. So she called this morning. She thought she was supposed to get in closer to 12, and she said, Mom, I think I can go with you, and I'll just leave early. She called up when we were on our way to pick her up and said, I can't, our plane's early. So anyway, she would love to be here. She would love to talk about her experiences, but our experience was all positive.
Well, I truly want to thank all our speakers today. It was such a great thing to be able to hear firsthand experiences from everybody, and their experiences with even being a part of these amazing floats that we used to have. So I just want to thank everyone today once again for joining us to our first history talk of the year. If you have any questions or want to contact us, feel free to get our contact information from the screen. And then I just want to promote our next event that we're going to be having is our preservation workshop series. Here at the museum, we offer this free program where we teach basically community members how to preserve their own family or personal history by using techniques that we use here at the museum, including how to take care of photographs, how to digitize your own items, work with textiles, how to preserve papers or letters you have, and artwork. And then we also have a genealogy workshop towards the end of the year. So once again, I just want to thank everybody for joining us today, and if you have any questions, feel free to stick around and we'll answer them. But I hope you all have a great day, and hope to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you.